Good morning. I'm Aurora Gault, and I'm a senior at Gem State Academy. I came to Gem State as a sophomore, not a freshman, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story. So I originally went to an Adventist elementary school called Boise Valley Adventist School. Yeah, I got some BVAS people in the house. It was a great time, but my mom, for one, my family started to not be able to afford a little bit the Adventist education, and also my mom heard about this small public charter school called North Star Public Charter that was a business and economics magnet, and she wanted me to have a little more of outside experience. So in 5th grade, I went to North Star Public Charter, and it was very different because it was a public school, and I didn't adjust very well, which was kind of unfortunate. But at the same time, the summer before I moved schools, my parents went through a divorce. So it was a very interesting time for me, going from a very familiar life to a very unfamiliar life. But as I started going through public school and meeting new people, it was hard for me to find friends who kind of supported me in what I wanted to be or what I wanted to do. And so I started dancing and ballet classes just to get another friend group going, because I was having kind of troubles making friends at school. So as I started ballet classes, I loved it, had so much fun. The performance aspect was my favorite, being able to stand up on stage and just kind of be the center of attention without being the center of attention. And it was a really great time. I made a lot of really good friends at ballet, and it was really great until about my 8th grade year, when my rehearsals were 6 days a week for 4 hours a night. So it was every day except for Sunday, and on Saturdays we had probably a 5 or 6 hour rehearsal. And it was really intense, and at first I didn't really see a problem with it, but then I started realizing that I wasn't going to church, and I wasn't cherishing or valuing my relationship with God or making it grow in any way, shape, or form. So I decided, up at summer camp, actually, if any of you have ever heard of Camp Haven, I went up there every summer from when I was probably 9 to the summer after my freshman year in high school. And it's a great place. It taught me a lot about what my relationship with God can be and how important it is to have a real relationship with God. So up at camp, the dean of the dormitory, who works at Gem State, was the pastor for the week, Dean Fitting, and he was talking a lot about Gem State and kind of encouraging people, because this age group, teen camp, were 8th graders, 9th graders who were going into high school. So they're kind of putting in that little advertisement to get more kids to Gem State. And I actually thought really seriously about this, because I was craving a community of people who would support me and encourage me in my relationship with God, which I had never had anywhere else except for growing up, but that was different. And since I wasn't going to church, because of dance rehearsals and things, I was afraid to go back to church because the people didn't know me anymore. I had grown so much those 5 years that I didn't go to church, and they didn't recognize me. A lot of people, when I came in the door of my home church, they would ask me if I was a visitor. And as silly as that may sound, it was actually pretty painful for me to go through. It was hard to go up to the people who I used to know, and they didn't remember me anymore. But at that summer camp, I decided that I wanted to go to Gem State to meet some people who would be around my same age, who I didn't know but I could get to know, and to be encouraged by them and be uplifted by them in my relationship with God. So to kind of illustrate this story a little more, if you have a Bible with you, I invite you to open to Mark chapter 2. Now this is a story about some friends of a paralyzed man who their faith actually healed this man. And it's super interesting to me that the faith of someone else can cause a miracle for another person. So I'll be reading from the New International Version. This is Mark chapter 2, verse 1. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. So you can just imagine going up to this house and there's no room to even get inside the door or the window. There's people crowded shoulder to shoulder. It's probably hot and sweaty and gross, but everyone wants to be there because Jesus is there. Verse 3 says, some men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man, carried by 4 of them. So these 4 friends bring their paralyzed friend into this house, but there's no room for him to get in. So I want to put you in their place. So imagine that you and 3 other friends are carrying this paralyzed man who can't move. He's probably pretty heavy because he's a full-grown man. So you're carrying him on this mat and you're like struggling to get him to the door, and then you find out that there's no room to even get into the door. So you're thinking, well, what are we going to do now? And your friends are kind of talking about it, and then one person says, well, why don't we try the roof? What? The roof? How are we going to get in through the roof? There's no chimney. It's not like we can become Santa Claus or anything. Verse 4 says, since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above by digging through it and then lowered the mat the man was laying on. These friends were so desperate to get their friend to Jesus, to heal him, that they were willing to dig through the roof of a house. That is so amazing to me. As much as I love my friends, I don't know if I would be willing to dig through the roof of a house for them. And so it continues in verse 5. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, son, your sins are forgiven. Now the faith of these friends who carried this paralyzed man to Jesus healed him. That's so incredible to think about. They carried him through the roof. They dug a hole in the roof just to get their friend to Jesus. The faith of a friend can bring a miracle to you. Another story that I saw this in is found in Luke chapter 7. This story is called The Faith of the Centurion. And I love this story also because it illustrates the same point, that a friend's faith can bring a miracle to your own life. Rather than being a paralyzed man in this story, there is a servant who is very sick. So Luke chapter 7, verse 1. When Jesus had finished saying all this to the people who were listening, he entered Capernaum. There a centurion's servant, whom his master valued highly, was sick and about to die. So this centurion has this servant who he values greatly. He's been a really great servant to him. He's always been there and always obeys what he has to say. But now he's sick and he can't work. So it says, verse 3, the centurion heard of Jesus and sent some elders of the Jews to him, asking him to come and heal his servant. When they came to Jesus, they pleaded earnestly with him, this man deserves to have you do this because he loves our nation and has built our synagogue. So Jesus went with them. He was not far from the house when the centurion sent friends to say to him, Lord, don't trouble yourself, for I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. This part to me is kind of crazy. So the friends of the centurion are saying, this man deserves to have you go to him and help his servant because he has built up our nation, he loves our nation, so he deserves to be healed. But when Jesus goes to the centurion, instead of even facing Jesus, sends some of his own friends to say, I don't deserve to even be in your presence. And that's how holy he views Jesus as. Verse 7. That is why I did not even consider myself worthy to come to you. But say the word and my servant will be healed. So even though the centurion doesn't feel like he's worthy enough to have God in his presence, he still believes and trusts in his power. He still believes that if Jesus says the word, then his servant will be healed. Verse 8, for I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, that one, come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he was amazed at him, and turned to the crowd following him. He said, I tell you, I have not found such great faith, even in Israel. Then the men who had been sent returned to the house and found the servant well. The amazing part about this story to me is that Jesus didn't even have to go to the servant to heal him. He was still far away from the place where the servant was, but because of the centurion's faith, because of his trust in God, Jesus was able to heal the servant that the centurion had. So going a little bit back to my story, my sophomore year, I eventually did make it to Gem State. although there were a few obstacles for me. One, of course, was funds for my family. Gem State is a very expensive school, but it is so worth every penny to me. And another obstacle is my dad was a little concerned about the distance. My house is about 45 minutes an hour away from the school, and we couldn't afford me to live in the dorm, so I would have to drive back and forth every day, and that's about an hour and a half to 2 hours on the road every single day. So my dad was pretty concerned about that. But the amazing thing about my story is that God worked out everything so that I could make it there. We had enough funds to pay for me to go there for my sophomore year, and they ended up setting up a shuttle system because there was one other student who lived in my area who wanted a ride to school. So the school sent a staff member to one of the other schools that was closer to me, and we rode with them to Gem State. And it was a real blessing to be able to take advantage of that. And another thing I want to highlight in my story is my transformation when I came to Gem State. Before, I was extremely scared of people, extremely introverted, and I would not talk to people, I would not look at people. You could not get me to get up front and do anything. I would panic, and kind of opposite now, but when I came to Gem State, literally 30 seconds after walking onto campus, people were coming up to me, asking me what my name was, earnestly wanting to get to know me, wanting to get to know the story of my life and things that I've been through, and wanting to encourage me in my faith, and that was the biggest thing to me. These people would come up to me and ask to pray with me, and that was the craziest thing I have ever experienced, going from people who will shove past you in the halls to people who will come up to you if you look upset and ask you if they can do anything for you or if they can pray for you, and that was so incredible to me. So going into this community of people who were accepting me, encouraging me, and uplifting me, I felt this miracle happen in my heart. I felt myself wanting to talk to people, wanting to go up to people and say hello and ask them how they were just because people had done so for me. See, when people are people in faith, when they uplift you and wrap you in God's love, it makes you want to do the same for other people. It makes you want to go out into the world and share what you have experienced because it was so amazing. When I went to Gem State, I realized God's healing power. God has this amazing power that He can go into your heart and heal any scar that has happened to it, any damage that has been done to it. And I never realized this until I came into this group of people who had such strong faith that they were willing to share with me. So I want to illustrate one more thing in Matthew chapter 14. And this is a story, I won't read the whole thing, but this is a story of great trust. And it is when Jesus asks Peter to walk out on the water with him. So they're sitting in the boat, and there's a big storm, and Peter sees Jesus on the water, and Jesus asks him to come out to him. So I want to read, focus especially on verse 29, starting there. "Come," he said. This is Jesus speaking. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." And this is my favorite verse of this whole story. Verse 31, it says, "Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him." See, Jesus didn't wait to save Peter when he was drowning. And Jesus didn't wait to save me when I was drowning in whatever it was that I was struggling with before I was uplifted by the faith of my friends. And Jesus says, "You of little faith," he says, "why did you doubt?" And that's a question I think we can ask ourselves every day. Why do we doubt? And there's not a clear answer to this, and I don't know if there ever will be until Jesus can explain it to us himself. But I believe that if you surround yourself with the people who will uplift you and show you to God, it opens up a whole new window for you. It opens up a window to healing, a window to acceptance, and a window to God's love. So before I close this morning, I want to leave you with a challenge that you can take with you. And that challenge is to encourage others in their spiritual walk and be the friend that they need for a miracle to happen in their life. Just like I went to Gem State and found friends who caused a miracle in my life, you should be the people who should go out from here and find those people that you can encourage for a miracle in their life. Let's pray.